Get off the marketing roller coaster and get on the automated fast track to digitally market your brand everywhere now. Join podcast producer Tom Hazard and Inc. columnist Tracy Hazard as they share easy content building formulas and smart cut secrets proven to fuel hundreds of blogs, podcasts, and brands with bingeable original content. Join the conversation on how to get your message out to the world. Be original. Be heard. Promote with power and purpose. Feed your brand.
Hey everyone, welcome to Feed Your Brand. I'm Tracy Hazard, and today I'm talking how to create an astoundingly simple podcast social media plan so you can get your show found. And that's the really important part, is everything that we do on social media is so that we can get some more listeners. So we definitely want to make sure that we're getting found in the process. So it's great to have a really stylized and beautiful social media and model for what we're doing. And all of that is great. But if at the end of the day, it's not getting us new listeners, why are we spending the time and effort? So this masterclass that I'm doing right now is all about the plan building side of it, how we make a social media plan that's specifically for your podcast. Now, of course, you're going to be doing other promotions and other things mixed in, but I'm only talking today about the podcast promotion portion of what you'll be pushing out on social media, the assets you're going to be creating, the plan you might want to do, and an audit you might want to create. This is a part of our planned social media month as a part of our coaching here at Podetize. And that comes with our hosting program. It comes with all of our services that we do at Podetize. So the normal coaching, but we decided to have a whole concentrated social media month. So the first class that we're doing right now is the Social Media Plan 101. We have other things coming up, and I'm going to mention them because I'm going to touch on a little point that we're then going to have a follow-up. So there might be multiple videos or multiple podcasts that you want to listen to in the process or watch in the process, and also other resources that you'll be able to find. As always, everything can be found at podetize.com. So you'll be able to find everything you need right there. So let's dive in. Okay. So we've got how to create an astoundingly simple podcast social media plan and get your show found. Remember, that's our goal. Everything that I'm going to be talking to you about today is all about really trying to make sure that we're getting that, getting you found, because it's really hard to be seen today, right? We know that social media conversion is as low as 1.3%. Now that is astoundingly low. And a lot of you are just like, whoa, that's crazy. Why am I even bothering on social media? But you have to remember there's a ton of volume on there, right? So 1.3% conversion is because you're interrupting people's day. They're looking at, gorgeous pictures of their nieces and nephews. They're sharing puppy pictures, like whatever that might be. And your messages might be an interruption to that. So it really takes the right kind of person to be seeing your messaging to decide they want to do that. Google, on the other hand, and the reason I have Google and YouTube lumped together is because Google owns YouTube, is that your conversion rate over there is up towards 13%. So linking out and linking to things that are outside, things that are in your WordPress website, things that are searchable on Google, like your blogs and your YouTube videos, are extremely important as well, because those have a higher conversion rate when someone's searching in Google. And of course, we all want to be searching in Google because, that's the first place we go. Now, remember, your odds can go way, 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 way up. In podcasting, your odds can go up to 37% in conversion rate. Now, remember that's our ad mixing number, right? So that's our conversion rate over there. But your odds can go way up in podcasting because there's not as many shows that are publishing live every single day. Remember, every single week, right? There are very few shows that do that. There's about 73% pod fade rate. Podetize has only a 7% pod fade rate among our clients. So we are the flip of that. But there's a very, a lot of shows out there that quit their shows. So there's not as much current and relevant information. So if you're posting every week and you're making sure people know that, then you have a lot more likelihood of being seen, heard, found, and eventually rewarded. So let's get started with what's going to be a part of our social media plan. If we're building a social media plan, we got to have some social goals, right? So I'm going to start here with what I call starter social media goals, because many of you may be more advanced in particular, channels. You might be more advanced on Instagram. You might be TikTok stars already. All of those things might be going really well for you. And that's great. And these might not be your goals, but I wanted to give the starter people, the people who don't really know what to expect from social media for podcasting, to take a look at this and say, what could be some realistic goals? Some goals might be you want to attract your audience. Some other goals might be get engagement and feedback. Some goals might just be to be alive and posting. I call that one. Be alive and posting. That means that your Facebook, even though you're not on Facebook every day, but your Facebook has a post in it every day or every week. That's how my Twitter is. I'm not on Twitter. I never check the messages. I never do anything there, but I have an auto posting that happens so that my Twitter doesn't look like it hasn't been updated since 2008. So we want to, or 2018, I don't know, whenever we quit it, 2018, we quit. So yeah, so it hasn't been updated since 2018. So I want to make sure though, that if someone's preferred mode of communication and hearing things is Twitter, they're getting the message about my show, but I don't want to have to work at it if it's not the strongest point and match to my audience. So that's the next thing that we want to look for, is we want to match our goals with the audience. So thinking about your social media goals, take a minute or two, write it down. You can type it in the chat if you're here on Zoom, type it in the chat if you're listening on Facebook. Absolutely just sort of write it down for yourself if you're listening after the fact, after this is live. Because the next thing we're really going to talk about is our target market, right? We want to be seen, heard, and found by the right people, by the right audience. So thinking about that the next thing that we're really going to do is assess our goal and say, if we're really trying to attract an audience, right? If that's our goal, is that audience attractor piece, and our audience isn't on Twitter, but it's on LinkedIn, then that makes more sense. So now we know where to focus our efforts, where to target our plan, right? So that's why we want to really clearly think through our goals and then make sure we identify our target market. Now, if you're starting out, you don't know if your market hypothesis is going to be right. So I like to call this hypothesis branding. You may have heard me say that before in other episodes or previous coaching calls, but I call it hypothesis branding. So I believe that I'm starting a podcast that's all about product reviews. And I believe that the majority of listeners are not just going to be consumers looking for the next cool product, but the majority of listeners are going to be people developing products, right? Because they're going to want to hear what they're up against. They're going to want to figure out how to get reviewed on my show. So I have an idea in my mind that my next podcast that I'm starting up right now has this audience that is going to be product-based business owners. That's my hypothesis. I might be really wrong. And it might be 99% consumers looking for cool, trendy products. But I think it's going to be more like 75% product development people and 25% consumers. That's my hypothesis. When I start my program out there, I'm thinking about, well, where will I find them? Where will they be? I think they're going to be on Instagram. So I'm going to do an Instagram strategy. That's going to be where my plan starts. And I'm looking at that thinking, and will both those audiences be there? Probably. So that makes a lot of sense. If only one of those audiences is there and the other's on LinkedIn, I might need a 2-channel strategy. So this is why I'm thinking about this from my hypothesis, my target market, and the overall goals that I have. I'm going to combine them. So here's again, a place you want to write down. Now you might be wrong. And as soon as you start getting listeners' feedback and other things like that, you can refine this plan. This plan is dynamic. That's its most important aspect to it. I like to look at it as a 90-day plan in the initial days if you're just starting your show, a 6-month plan to a year-long plan if you're seasoned in this and you've been doing this a while and you know your audience, because that's not the part you need to fuss with. If you know your audience, you might mess with your assets and you might change things up in how you post over the course of a year, but you don't have to change the channel strategy. And that's what we're looking at first. So if you've never started before, if this is your first time, you're really just starting up all your social media channels for this particular podcast that you're working on, start with one channel at a time. I say that because it's stressful to try to start up all of them at once. Start up one, get it under your belt. 90 days later, start the next one. 90 days later, start the next one. It is not going to hurt your listenability. It is just going to cascade over time into you getting to the right place you need to be by the time you hit 25 to 50 episodes. So it'll be perfectly timed with when your show gets that sort of season value where the residual value of continually posting is going to have a better effect anyway. So I'm not worried about it at all. Just start one channel at a time. Take it easy for yourself. And the same thing goes if you're really overwhelmed and you've got a big social media strategy going on for your business, and now you're throwing your podcast in the mix. Just do it one channel at a time as you build it into the program. Now, maybe you can accelerate it and you can do 30 days focusing on making sure you got your LinkedIn right, and then 30 days add on your Instagram, but just look at it at one channel at a time. Don't overwhelm yourself. It's not worth it. It's going to take the time it takes anyway. If you try to do it all at once, you won't be successful at any of it, and you'll just end up stressed about it. So do not worry. This is not going to harm the growth of your show. It's not going to harm anything at all to just take it a little bit slow and concerted. In fact, it's going to make it so that you can refine your plan better so that you're more efficient as you move into the next channel and the next channel and the next channel. So the first thing I want you to do is take a social media snapshot. I physically took a snapshot, right? Like this is a screen share, a screen grab of me on LinkedIn. Right? So this is the screen grab of what it looks like. You can see my show banner is behind me, the Binge Factor. Now I'm about to update that because I'm adding a new show. So I'm going to have two shows there. So I'm going to have the Binge Factor and the next little thing, and they're going to show up there in that banner. I've made sure that the cover arts coordinate together so that this banner looks good when that comes together like that. I've got all my information here. I've got 500 plus connection. I've got like 10,000 or something. I don't even know where I am on that. I've got my tag and my information. So this is the header part of the page. I just took a snapshot of it so you could see what the visual looked like. Okay. But we're going to review how to optimize your profiles. We're going to do 5 easy ways to optimize social media profiles to attract devoted podcast listeners. That's our next week episode. So that's the next thing in the social media month that we're going to discuss. So I'm going to go over these profiles, but right now it's a good idea to know what you have because you don't always look at it from the new listener, from a new person connecting with you's perspective. You see it with just your profile photo typically. So you don't get to see all of this. You don't always know what it looks like. And it's a good idea if you just take this snapshot right now. And next week, we'll just go over improvements, ways that you can make your social media profile, let listeners know that you have a podcast, and help attract them to connect and engage with you. That's an important part as well. Let's also take a look at this other one. So this is my Facebook page for the show. That's a decision you might want to make. Sometimes you want to make a Facebook page, a LinkedIn page. You can do things like that where it's just about the show because maybe you have so much more to your business and your company. So I'm the CEO of Podetize. There's a lot of Podetize information. I have a Podetize company page. So in Facebook in particular, although I do have it on LinkedIn as well, but I have a separated page for the Binge Factor, which is my podcast, right? This is a strategy you might want to do. This is what mine looks like. It's super simple. There's just a header about the Binge Factor, what it's like, what it's about, and a little bit about me. This is just simple. If you don't have one, don't worry. You'll just use your personal profile. You'll just start there and you'll decide later if you want to have that. I happen to have 10,000 followers on this page, which merged from one brand to another. So it's now the Binge Factor, but it was a previous podcast page. And those people have stayed with me. So because there was residual value there, I decided to rebrand it and use it for the Binge Factor. This is something you might want to do. So when we take a social media snapshot, what are we looking for? We want to take our direct URL. So I'm Facebook / the binge factor, right? Like that's the page here. Same thing on LinkedIn, right? It's consistent. Tracy Hazard with 2 Z's, right? All spelled out. So checking your URL and making sure the direct link to you is similar in all the different places. That's important. So you're going to copy and paste that. And you can just paste it into a Word doc, into a Google Doc, something like that. I take a snapshot like I just did of the banner and header image so I can see what it looks like for others. I also do it on my mobile device because sometimes it doesn't look it looks great on your computer, but it looks terrible on the mobile device. So you might want to do that too. I'll take a look and review the about and description, and I might copy and paste all the text over because if there's typos and things, you don't always see it in the profile. But if you copy it into your Word doc or you copy it into your Google Doc, it'll flash and show you all your typos and on all the problems there. So it's not a bad thing to go and check that again, even if you feel like it doesn't need to be updated. And then if you have stats and you know how to look at them, because not everybody does, I don't want you to stress over them, but if you have stats, take a look, see what some of your best posts have been, see the times a day that posting has been most successful, check them. Measure up. You want to always keep that sort of measure up model. And so we're measuring up from where you are. So you might want a snapshot of what those stats look like today, especially if you're taking this more seriously. So for me, my LinkedIn is pretty serious. I've been doing it a really long time. I'm working on some programs. I'm working on some amping up, and I want to measure whether that's actually working. So I'm going to take a measurement of where it is before I start. And then once I start posting and enacting my plan, I want to check it again and see how is that doing. So those are really important things to keep in mind. So we're evaluating our channels though for the audience. So the audience we had yesterday and the audience we're going to have with the podcast moving forward might not be measured well. So we also don't want to take our stats as hard rules, right? Like, oh, well, it's not working. We want to take our stats and say, well, I don't have this audience yet. Let's see if it grows. Let's check its growth rather than checking against just the number. So those are some things that you might want to look at and do. Now, when I do a social media review for clients, and Whitney Lauritsen and I do them regularly, these are various things. So now this is when you're working with us on a bigger social media sort of program, but this is what we do. We would insert the website link here. We make some recommendations. So if your LinkedIn and your Instagram are not matching, maybe there's a way for you to get a match together. It's always easy to get your podcast, to get whatever the name of your show is with the word pod at the end of it. Pretty much you can get it because you should be the only podcast with your name. So there's always a way to do that and make sure those links are matching as best you can across your social channels. I insert the social profile link just so it's really quick and easy to like pop out and double check something if you have a question. And again, we're checking profile header copy, the posts review to check and see how the posts look. And then we make recommendations. So this is kind of what we do internally for our own shows. We do it every 6 months to a year, depending on the channel. And you might do this at the beginning. You might not do it again for a year. It's no requirement to obviously do that. So once you've got that into the process and you're really checking through that, you're able to be to sort of have that groundwork set for this is where we are. Now we want to say, okay, what are we going to post? What comes next? And we're going to choose our assets. So now our assets are a industry term. And so I want to define them here. Assets are things like images, graphic images with your episode title on it. They might be episode graphics that have your guest pictures on it and the quote that's being said. We call those ego bait internally at Podetize. It might be that. They might be things like video memes or audiograms. You may have heard all those terms. I'm going to go in and I'm going to define them as we move forward so I can talk about them. Our multimedia package at Podetize, which is now what we call our bigger package that you go from video to audio to blog to social share assets. Those assets are included in the production of the show. So this is another reason why I'm updating today our masterclass on this, because I really want to describe what those assets look like. Now, we spent a lot of time getting them refined so that we know exactly what the right assets that are working out there or ones that our clients are choosing. So let's start in with some of these social share assets and what kind of things and you might choose some and you might not choose others. It's totally up to you. Your Instagram strategy, your TikTok strategy, your LinkedIn strategy might be heavier in one area or another. So maybe you want multiples of a certain kind. So that's something you can do as well. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So episode art is typical because this is going to go on your blog. The reason I like these to be as visually impactful as possible. The image is extremely important. The title is obviously valuable here. Who your guest is, your podcast cover art is because when I share them on social, I want these things. I want other people to share the blog. And when they share the blog, I want them to be sharing the fact that this is a podcast. I want them to be sharing proper titles. I want them to be sharing my guests. So these are really easy because all someone has to do is take the link of the page for your blog, share it out, and these things autofill into social media. So that's why we want these as it. Now, some of you have blogs set up where it's just an image and the text of the title of your show comes into it just based on the template of your website. That's okay. What I recommend you do is take one of these images and set them as a featured image behind the scenes. And that way, when somebody shares, it will show up in their social media feed and they're able to do this. It makes it really easy for your guests to share your blog post, to share your episode that way. And of course, we want them to encourage them to share your website blog post and not the Apple link for your show, because that doesn't do you any good. It's not getting the circulation and getting the people that you need. So episode art is one asset that we have, and it's an extremely important one, and it should go along with every show. I personally, because of the way my website is, I have a square and a rectangle. Now, these are from two different shows. Keep in mind here, these are not from the same show, two different shows, but I'm showing you the square of our 100th episode, which just happened recently. And I'm showing you the rectangle. Now, what's the 100 is hiding is the actual Binge Factor logo, which is also on that rectangular version of the episode art. So guest ego bait. This is another one that I found extremely important. I found it back from my days writing for Inc. magazine. The guest ego bait is one of the most important things you can do to get your show shared. And that is where you're sharing a quote that you say about your guest, or you say about a product, or you say about the topic if you don't have a guest, right? So we want to make sure that this is broadly termed. You are able to do some of those, and I'll show you what quote graphics look like next. But guest ego bait is specifically for guests, right? The guests that you're having on your show. So if I were having Tom Hazard on my show, I would say something unbelievably amazing about him. That's the quote that would go. And that is exactly what is going to be onto the Binge Factors. It's going to be in the Binge Factors website as well. So the image is put into our blog, into our image library in our website, not necessarily a blog post. Sometimes I use them on the blog post as well, but that's up to you. But if I put that in my image library, then I share it out with them with that link to it. I'm creating cross links between my website and my guest, their website, and social media. I'm creating a really dynamic, highly linked environment that is going to help improve my searchability, both in Google, which is going to help raise that, because when my searchability is based on the value of my crosslinks. And I'm also going to be creating great social media linking as well, because who isn't going to want to share this on social when it says something amazing about themselves? What I found is the more celebrity guest I had, or the more celebrity feature I wrote in my Inc. magazine column, what happened was they wouldn't share it if I put a quote of what they said. They were more likely to share it when I said something about them. It felt too promotional to say it about themselves. And so that was kind of interesting. It's like, hey, I'm on the show. Instead, there's like, hey, look what happened on the Binge Factor. Look what someone said about me. For some reason, that is just more viable to people out there. They like to share that because it's like a testimonial about them. It's third-party validation, and we all want to increase our authority within our social profiles. It's also a goal for many, many people, right? Is to increase your authority over time. And these kinds of things do that. What we found is by having both pictures on there, we increase the share. If you only have your podcast logo Unless your podcast logo has your picture on it, then it counts as a picture. But if you only have your podcast logo and the guest photo, they are less likely to share it than if you have your photo and their photo side by side, or top and bottom in this particular cases. So now some people like to use rectangles, there's squares. You can have whatever you want based on what social profile you're going to share them in most often, because you're going to share them as well, right? Because you want to share the guests that were on your show. You want to be able to tag them. You might use them in an Instagram story. There's all different ways of which you can use them. So we want to make sure that you are absolutely getting the size and style you want. So at Podetize, you get to choose what that is. Most often people tend to use it in a square, but we have been seeing lately more, I'm going to call them vertical offerings. So longer vertical ones, which are probably more suited to like the shape and size of your phone. So you're filling up that screen better. Audiograms. Oh, for some reason, they're all popping in there. There we go. Audiograms. Audiograms are when you don't have video for your show, or you just don't want to use the video for your show, because sometimes it's just better to like link it to being a podcast better, and like emphasizing that as well. So we use an audiogram, which is a wave file. It's like you see the audio words go across, and you see the wave move at the bottom. So it technically is a video, but it's a video file created from an audio file. And so it's a static image, just like you see here, but the audio file moves at the bottom, and the captions move, of course, as well. These do really well. You can see that sort of longer, more vertical one. That's the one we typically use in Pinterest a lot, and it does extremely well over there. Audiograms seem to do well there. They were doing really well for a while in Instagram, and I think they still will, because Instagram is putting more of an emphasis on video, and they are a form of video. So if you like the audiogram model, or if you're not producing a video for your show, but you'd like to do this as a part of it, audiograms are a really viable solution. And they're really typical things that people are comfortable with and used to seeing with podcast shows. Again, both your guest and your images will be on there, the title. Usually these are 1 minute or less clips. We rarely, if ever, use full-length audiograms. We might do a full-length audiogram if for some reason the video was bad in a particular episode, but I try to run video on all of my episodes. But if that happened occasionally, I might run a full-length audiogram and insert it into YouTube. But that's a very rarity, because that's a lot of captions to read over time and listen to, but if you want to make sure that your YouTube channel is consistent with your podcast and consistent with what had been there before, and you have one that's just missing a video, then this is a good way to do that. Video memes are another version of this. And sometimes people confuse audiograms and video memes, but video meme is exactly a clip of the video. And we've been playing around with some different styles. And so, you all get a sneak peek at the Next Little Thing branding. So what we've been doing with the Next Little Thing branding, because that doesn't come out for a month. So you guys are getting a sneak peek at that. So you can see the podcast episode title goes at the top. The video clip goes in the middle. There's the 2-liner subs, which means the caption that goes there. And there's the branding for the show. In this particular case, you can see there's no picture of Tom and I, because Tom and I will always appear in the video. So there's really no reason for us to have our pictures anywhere else on this. But we also do, and I would say 90% of the video memes we do have no branding around it at all. So you can see that obviously I have the Binge Factor and Feature brand behind my head in the video. I have it right here now if you're looking at me on the video instead of the screen share. But if you're looking at that, you see that I've got my brand in there anyway. So it's already integrated into the image that I'm projecting. But the full size video, it just is doing better right now in Instagram and LinkedIn, in Facebook in general. And so sometimes we use the branding and sometimes we don't. It depends on how we're going to use the video meme itself. So just keep that in mind. You can do it any which way you want. You can have branding around the image that you have. I'm showing in the center, but we like to use sort of what we call the pure video. But again, memes are clips, so they're not long. They're usually 1 to 2 minutes maximum. Sometimes they're 30 seconds, depending on where we're using them. Guest quotes. So now this is a little bit different. because we're really just quoting. And what I find is that these guest quotes tend to do better. That's what we've discovered, is that they tend to do better if there isn't a person's face associated with it. There's a name of who said it. You might want to put where it was said. So I might say, it's a quality of engagement I want to create. Penny Zinker, host to Take Back Time, as said on the Binge Factor. So that might be something you can add to it and do it. The one on the left is me being quoted. So it's me within my own channel, even though the Binge Factor channel doesn't say Tracy Hazard on it. So that is why my name is on the quote here. And so, we're just trying to create these options where you're creating a statement. And the reason I like these is because these can be great options for creating engagement. They can be great options for asking a question that goes along with the image that is here. So if I were doing the first one here, the number 2 places most people find podcasts are from friends and Google. Where, I might put in the caption, where did you get your last podcast recommendation from? Right? So I might ask that question to my audience and try to generate a social conversation and engagement opportunity. These guest quotes can be great ways for you to create that engagement and get them to come back and listen, because they're like, well, I want to know more about that. Obviously Bree Noble here in the middle, she's saying sometimes there can be some embarrassing moments where you say the wrong thing, but that's actually endearing to your binge listeners. You might want to go like, what kind of wrong things? Does she give an example? I'd like to check out that show. I'd like to hear what she said. So it might draw people in as well. So you give them a fear of missing out by using these quotes. So those are just a couple of ways that guest quotes can be really useful, even though they don't have a picture of anyone on there. And the fact that they're not video. They can also be used in Instagram stories. So you're mixing multiple things where you have the guest picture, you have this, maybe you have a little clip, and you're doing something where you're creating that sort of story through that is creating an opportunity for someone to have a conversation with you and check it out. Most importantly, that's what we're trying to do here, is get people to listen, right? So we want to get them to check it out. So this is some of the ways we use guest quotes. This is some of the way we use host quotes, right? So this is where we're making quotes from the show. Typically, this is something that I'm saying. We are putting this because my picture, again, on the Binge Factor channels, like the Binge Factor Facebook page I showed you earlier and the Binge Factor Instagram, my name is not directly present, but I have a large following that can be tagged. So if in the Binge Factor page, I utilize one of these quotes that has what I said as a host, curating your guests carefully, making them relevant to your audience is the fastest path to a bingeable interview style show. And I make a post that's really talking about how to do that well, but this is the quote taken out of it. I might be able to invite a lot of engagement, and my page can tag me, which allows me to be cross-linking between the people who are friends with me, being able to see what's being posted on my page. So that's where these host quotes can be valuable. If you've got a separated podcast page in LinkedIn, Facebook, or wherever that you do that, or you have multiple Instagram accounts, those are ways in which you can use these host quotes. So those are the different types of assets. And I know that was a lot, and you just start thinking about these. These are our post types. So now I have all these post types. I have an ego bait. I have a video meme. I have video memes from past episodes. I have ego bait guests. I have audiograms that I might want to use. I have the straight share from the blog post that I might want to use. So this is an example of how you might want to organize it. So on the left side, I put the social channel that I'm targeting. And now as you can see, I'm not working on Twitter very well. So I'm not that interested in it. I'm going to have an auto post and share 1 to 3 posts a day. I'm probably only going to do 1, but I'm going to do that 3 to 5 days a week. Super simple. I've got it set up to automatically do it every time I post a new blog. It's going to automatically do it. I might have it auto tweet from whenever I post on Medium, which is something that I do as well, because I turn my podcast into articles. So it auto posts from there as well. So that's where I get up to these auto posting 3 to 5 days a week. It just happens. But I might set out different types. So I might go through all of those assets, number them, and say, number 1 are ego baits, number 2 are video memes, number 3 are audiograms, number 4 are host quotes, and just number them for myself and say, we're going to do post type 1, 3, 5 on LinkedIn. We're going to do 2, 4, and 6 on Instagram, like whatever it is you're going to do, and start to set yourself up here. Now, I've also made this really easy for myself because my concentration is on LinkedIn and Instagram. Well, it's not that I don't care about Facebook. It's just not as important. What I share is not as important because it typically just already works in Facebook because, again, I have larger number of followers there. It's a little bit easier. I can take what I've already done for LinkedIn and reuse those posts. Generally, I don't reuse them on the same day of the week. So if I had an ego bait guest on a Monday, I won't have ego bait until Tuesday or Wednesday on Facebook. So I do shuffle them around. That is something that I also do. And you can do that as well. So this is kind of how we use our plan. We decide our channel. We decide how many days of the week we want to be posting. We decide the frequency per day we want to post. I assign them to someone. So if I'm not posting myself or if I'm not doing that, but it's going to get scheduled by my assistant might be in there, but there might be Instagram because I need to do it from my mobile device. Maybe that has to be assigned to me to be loaded up from there. Videos don't always work in any of the posting tools. So you have to typically load them up manually yourself in Instagram. So I think there are some tools that are getting better at that and they're working that out. So speaking of tools, here's some that we've used or are using or are testing out. Meet Edgar and Buffer are my 2 favorite go-tos because they're super simple to use. Meet Edgar has a great evergreen tool on it. So when your posts are in the system, they're already in there in the evergreen, being able to reshare them. So I have this article that I wrote about, I have 2 articles actually that I wrote that are perfect for May 4th. They're Star Wars related. And so may the 4th be with you. And I have these 2 articles that I continually share on May 4th, scheduling them, finding them, getting them through. They're super simple and Meet Edgar. Buffer has some similar things where you can draw in feeds. So you can have your blog feed automatically in there, be able to make quick and easy posts from there. Buffer is a super simple scheduling as well. Both of them are very low cost. So it doesn't take a lot to use the posting tools. I know a lot of people use Hootsuite. Co-schedule is a lot more complicated and more expensive if you're running a network or an agency model, or you're juggling multiple businesses and you need to combine them together. You might want to try Co-schedule. They're the one that has my favorite headline tool. So I do use them. I just don't use them for posting. Many people use HubSpot. HubSpot has a posting tool as well. And so if you're already a HubSpot member, it's already your CRM of choice, then you might want to use that. Lately.ai is our new one. We're testing that out right now. I don't know yet how to describe how to use it yet. There's a lot of complexities to it, but we're going to give you a report in the future on it. There's some really cool things happening there. But that's one that we've just started checking out. It's quite pricey, but there's some features that might be worth it as we test that out and find out for you. My posting rule. I call it my 30-30-30-10 rule. This is kind of my idea about how I utilize things and how I mix things up. Feel free to make it, 25-25-25, whatever, adjust it for yourself based on the number of posts you're making per week or whatever that is. But in general, I like to have 30% of my own stuff, right? So, when I say own stuff, I mean my podcasts, my articles, and any promotions offers that I might make. They all count in that 30%. So if I need to up my game because I'm promoting an event that's happening, I will down the number of posts on my podcast for the week. I don't want to mess up that ratio of it. I want to keep it fairly straightforward so that my audience doesn't feel sold to too much. That's my personal view of it. This is why I call this my rule, right? Tracy's rule. You may feel differently about it. Your coaches may feel differently about it. Your advertising partners may feel different about this, but I have found that if I keep this down, then I'm serving more. And actually that comes back to people being more likely to, when I do make an offer, select it. That's just the way that I have found that works for me. 30% of it is other people's stuff. So now in the case of your podcast, you're sharing other people, right? The ego bait is other people. Quotes from your guest are other people's stuff. So even though it's on your show, it's still other people you're sharing, other stuff. So that's where I come in and say that one's the 30%. So in a way, you're sneaky getting 60% of your own show in there. You can absolutely do that. 30% of what I post then, out of all of that, an additional 30%, I need it to be interactive. This is where I'm asking questions. This is where I do offer calls to action, maybe small micro commitments of things like, do you think I should do this? Yes or no? Like whatever that might be, or which one do you like? 1, 2, 3, interactive and engagement with your audience is really important. And then 10% of everything that you post in a week should be kind of like weird, uniquely you, anything like that you can think of that is just off the, really expressing you. Very typically, you'll find that I'll put pictures of the dog podcasting with me, or sleeping while I'm podcasting, because that's typically what happens. Or my girls will do funny things of, pretending to be on the microphone, or interviewing each other, and they're imitating their mom, and that's kind of uniquely me too. So we might want to share some of those things, and so share some things that you just think you have your unique sense of humor, and different things like that. I'm cautious. I don't share politics. I don't do any of that. If you're looking for insights into any part of me about those kinds of things, they're not going to be on my social media. You'd have to be my real friend to know those things, right? So it's still crafted as part of my social media view of me, but it gets you a little more insight into the personal side of me. So thinking about those rules, that also might be something you want to throw in to your social media schedule. And so as I go back to that, you might want to just have number 5 on your LinkedIn is be something really personal, or for me, typically it's an article share. It's something that I was just I found really interesting that I think everybody else will. That's my view on LinkedIn. It's a lot more professional, but it is a unique view and insight into what I'm reading at any given moment. That might be great. Instagram and Facebook, like I said, those are going to be pictures of my kids and my dog, pictures of Tom and I out at an event, having some fun, meeting some fans, those kinds of things might be coming up in there. So just a little different model based on, how I'm treating the profile, how professional it is, what my mix of friends are in Facebook. I've got lots of family and friends from events and networks and things that I have across the country. They're on Facebook. So I do want them to see those things now and again. So that's why I have that policy of doing this 30-30-10 rule and making sure that I at least throw some of those things in every single week. So I hope this was really helpful for you. I'm sure there's going to be some questions and everything. If you were live on our call, if you were a part of the Podetize community, you'd be able to ask questions right now. If you're getting this after the fact because you just are listening to Feed Your Brand, or you're just checking this out and seeing one of these masterclasses in YouTube or on our podetize.com website, absolutely, you can ask me questions at any time. If you want to reach me personally on social media, you're going to have to go to LinkedIn, because that's the only way that I will answer it myself in a timely manner, because I check my LinkedIn twice a day. Everywhere else, I don't. If you want to ask some questions, tag me in the posts, though, as these are shared on social, and I'm happy to answer it. Same thing on YouTube. You can tag me in there, and I will check that out. So thanks everyone for listening to the masterclass on social media, on really how to create a more dynamic and astoundingly simple podcasting social media plan so you can get your show found. And I'll be back next week with the next follow-up in our social media plan on ways to optimize your profile.
For more tips, tactics, and strategies, visit us online at podetize.com or on social at Podetize. Thanks for exploring the power of podcasting and how to be seen, heard, found, and rewarded in our noisy digital world. Keep on podcasting.